place was already loud when the afternoon began. People moved in every direction, some rushing, some slowing down only for a moment before moving on again. Sounds mixed together in the air. Footsteps echoed on the floor. Voices overlapped. Somewhere nearby, a piano stood against the wall, old but clean, placed there for anyone brave enough to sit and play. Most days it was ignored. Other days, someone would press a few keys, smile and walk away. That day felt no different at first. The piano waited quietly, like it always did. A few people passed it without even turning their heads. Some had headphones on. Others were busy staring at their phones. Life moved fast, and music was just background noise. Then a small figure appeared near the piano. She was young, clearly younger than most people around her. Her clothes were simple, nothing fancy, nothing that stood out. Her shoes looked a bit worn, and her hair was tied back in a careless way, as if no one had spent extra time fixing it. She stood there quietly, looking at the piano like it was something important, something personal. She didn't rush toward it. She didn't touch it right away. She just stood and watched. Her hands rested at her sides, fingers slowly moving as if she were already playing in her mind. A few people noticed her but didn't stop. To them, she was just a child waiting for someone, or maybe just curious. A little distance away, an adult sat at a table with a coffee nearby. He was well-dressed, confident, and clearly comfortable in the space. People around him knew who he was, or at least knew of his skill. He had played in many places on many stages. Music was not just a hobby for him. It was his identity. He was used to respect, used to attention. When he noticed the girl near the piano, he smiled at first. Not a warm smile, but one filled with quiet amusement. He leaned back slightly and watched her from where he sat. To him, the moment felt predictable. Children often came close to the piano, pressed random keys, laughed, and walked away. After a moment, he spoke, loud enough for the people near him to hear. His voice carried a light laugh. He made a comment about her age, about how she was far too young to understand real music. A few people nearby smiled politely. Some nodded. No one challenged him. The words were not cruel, but they were careless. The girl heard him. She did not turn her head. She did not respond. Her face stayed calm, almost unreadable. If the words hurt, she did not show it. Instead, she took a slow breath and stepped closer to the piano. Her small hand reached out, brushing the edge of the keys without pressing them. The piano made no sound. She pulled her hand back, as if reminding herself to wait. There was patience in her movement, something unusual for someone so young. Around her, life continued. Someone laughed loudly. Phone rang. A group of people walked past, blocking the view for a second before moving on. The pianist took a sip of his coffee and looked away, already losing interest. But the girl stayed. She slowly sat down on the bench. Her feet didn't reach the floor. They hung in the air, swinging just a little. She adjusted herself, sitting straighter, pulling a bit closer to the keys. She placed both hands in her lap and closed her eyes. That simple action caught the attention of one person nearby. Then another. There was something serious about the way she sat, something that didn't match the image of a child playing around. Still, no one spoke. The pianist glanced back when he noticed the quiet forming. It was subtle but real. The noise around the piano seemed to soften, like the space itself was holding its breath. The girl opened her eyes. She lifted her hands and placed her fingers on the keys. She did not press them yet. That pause felt longer than it really was. In that moment, the pianist felt a strange feeling he could not explain. It wasn't fear, but it wasn't confidence either. It was a small crack in his certainty. Still, he brushed it away. He leaned forward slightly, ready to look away again, already sure he knew how this would end. The girl took another breath. Her shoulders relaxed. Her fingers moved. And just like that, the first note filled the air. It was soft, but clear. Not loud, not messy. Clean and steady. It cut through the background noise like a gentle request for silence. A few steps away, someone stopped walking. Another note followed. Then another. The sound was controlled, careful, and intentional. It wasn't random. It wasn't playful. Carried weight. The pianist froze. His cup stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes fixed on the girl, his smile gone. The sound coming from the piano didn't match the picture in front of him. His body leaned forward without him realizing it. The girl continued to play, her face calm, her eyes focused on the keys. Her hands moved with quiet confidence, as if they knew exactly where to go without thinking. Around them, the space changed. Conversations faded. Footsteps slowed. People began to turn their heads, drawn by something they couldn't ignore. The piano was no longer background noise. It was the center of the room. The pianist felt his chest tighten. He listened closely now, picking up details he never expected to hear from someone so young. The timing was right. The pressure on the keys was right. The feeling behind the notes was real. He realized, with growing discomfort, that this was not a child guessing. This was someone who understood music. His earlier words echoed in his mind. They suddenly felt heavy, careless, and wrong. He shifted in his seat, unable to look away. The girl played on, unaware of the change she was creating, or maybe fully aware and simply focused on the only thing that mattered to her in that moment. The sound filled the space, steady and strong, and the story had only just begun. The room felt different as the girl continued to play. It was still busy around her, but the sound of the piano changed everything. People slowed down, their steps hesitant, their conversations fading until only the music remained. Even the light seemed softer, as if it wanted to watch and listen too. The girl's fingers moved with a calm purpose, pressing each key with care, and the notes came together in a way that made anyone who heard them pause. The pianist, who had scoffed at her just minutes before, felt his confidence slipping. He had expected something small, something easy to ignore. Instead, the room was filled with a sound that made him uneasy. Each note was precise but filled with emotion. He had never heard a child play like this. It was not about speed or volume. It was about feeling. Every note seemed to speak, and he realized it spoke truths he could not deny. A few people gathered closer, forming a loose circle around the piano. Their faces showed curiosity, surprise, even admiration. Phones came out slowly, not for selfies or jokes, but to capture the unexpected talent in front of them. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered harsh words. For a moment, the city outside seemed far away, and this small corner of the room became a world of its own. The girl played without looking at anyone. She didn't smile and she didn't show nerves. She was focused, lost in the music. Each hand moved independently, yet together they created a harmony that was natural, effortless. The sound seemed to float, delicate but strong. It carried sadness and hope at the same time, as if she had learned from both. The pianist leaned closer, resting his elbow on the table. He couldn't look away. He listened to how her fingers pressed the keys softly yet firmly, how she lifted them without hesitation. He tried to find a mistake, a moment where she would falter, but there was none. Every part of her playing was intentional, meaningful. It was music, not noise. It was more than skill. It was understanding. He noticed small details that amazed him. The way her fingers curved, the way she used her wrist to guide the melody, the subtle pauses that added feeling to each phrase. She was small, almost fragile, yet she made the piano sound large, full of life. It was a strange contrast that made him rethink everything he had assumed about talent and age. Around them, the world was starting to quiet even more. The people who had walked past stopped and looked back. A few children leaned closer, curious about someone their own age doing something so advanced. Adults whispered to each other, trying to describe what they were hearing. Nobody had an answer, and yet everyone felt it. There was something remarkable happening, something that went beyond ordinary understanding. The pianist felt a mixture of emotions. At first, there was disbelief. How could someone so young play like this? Then came surprise, the kind that twists your stomach and makes you rethink your assumptions. Finally, a little shame. He had judged too quickly. He had laughed and assumed she was just a child who would fail to impress. Now he felt foolish for underestimating her. The girl did not stop. Her music shifted slightly, slower now, softer, almost like a story told in whispers. The notes carried memories, and the pianist could almost feel the experiences behind them. There was joy hidden among sadness, a gentle strength hidden in softness. It was music that understood life, not just theory. And for someone so young, that was extraordinary. People around them leaned closer, unable to resist the pull of her performance. Some held their breath, some wiped away small tears, others simply smiled quietly, caught in the spell of her playing. It was a rare moment where age, background, and expectations didn't matter. The music connected everyone in a silent understanding. The pianist's hands trembled slightly as he held his coffee. He had played for years, yet he felt inexperienced now. It was as if this child had reminded him that talent and feeling could not be measured by experience alone. He realized that he had more to learn from her in a few minutes than he had in years of performing on his own. The girl's eyes were calm, focused on the keys. She seemed unaware of the crowd or the man watching her closely. Her music was not for praise or attention. It was for expression. Every note carried a small piece of her, a story that could not be told with words. And the pianist understood that for the first time, he had been given a glimpse into a world he could not reach by skill alone. Around her, the piano seemed to breathe with her. The room felt alive. People stopped glancing at their watches, stopped checking their phones, stopped worrying about schedules or errands. They were here now, present in a moment that would not last forever, and they knew it. The pianist's mind raced. He thought about the children he had taught, the students who struggled with technique, the performances where he had felt proud of his skill. None of it mattered now. Skill alone could not create what he was hearing. She had something deeper. She had understanding, patience, and a connection to the music that could not be taught. He watched her fingers move across the keys, each one producing a note that felt alive. The melody rose and fell, gentle and strong, like waves on a calm sea. There were no mistakes, no hesitation, no need for correction. It was natural and it was breathtaking. Somewhere in the back, a few people whispered about her age, their voices softer now, filled with awe rather than doubt. A few nodded to each other, realizing that they had been wrong to assume that youth meant inexperience. She was more than her age, more than a child with curiosity. She was an artist, creating something that touched hearts without needing explanation. The pianist's pride began to fade, replaced by respect. He knew he had been foolish, but he also knew he had witnessed something rare, something that would stay with him forever. He realized that judging too soon could make you miss beauty, and humility was the only way to truly understand it. The girl continued to play, uninterrupted. Her hands moved with grace and precision. The sound filled every corner, but it did not overwhelm. It was gentle yet commanding. Every note carried intention, every pause carried thought. It was music that spoke without words, and those who listened understood without needing translation. People began to smile, quietly, without loud applause. Some had tears in their eyes, others had goosebumps. The pianist felt a lump in his throat, a mixture of surprise, admiration, and regret. He had scoffed, and now he felt privileged to hear what he had missed. Time passed differently in that space. What had started as an ordinary afternoon became something extraordinary. The girl played on, unbothered, unaware of the effect she had on everyone around her. Her focus never wavered, her determination never faltered. She was in her element, and the world was watching, learning, and being humbled. When the final notes lingered in the air, there was silence. Nobody spoke at first. The music had done something that words could not capture. The pianist finally moved, standing slowly, almost unsure of himself. He walked closer, not to criticize, not to judge, but simply to witness the end of something remarkable. The girl lifted her hands from the keys and exhaled softly. Her face remained calm, unreadable, yet there was a sense of quiet satisfaction in her posture. She had told her story, and everyone had listened. The pianist looked at her, no words coming. He realized that this small child had just taught him a lesson he would not forget. That first scoff, that careless laugh had no place here. The room was filled with something more important: music, emotion, and truth. And for a moment, nothing else mattered. As the last notes of her music hung in the air, the room remained quiet, almost in disbelief. The people who had stopped to listen didn't immediately move. Some blinked, unsure if they had really heard what they thought they had. A few leaned closer to the piano, as if proximity would confirm the reality of the moment. Everyone felt the weight of something extraordinary. The pianist, who had sat quietly watching, could no longer contain his curiosity. He moved closer to the piano, careful not to interrupt, but drawn by the need to see more. He watched her small fingers resting lightly on the keys, her posture calm and confident. It was hard to believe someone so young could create something so powerful, so complete. The girl noticed his movement but did not look at him directly. Her eyes remained focused on the keys, but her awareness of the audience around her was clear. She had played before many times and knew how to hold attention without needing recognition. Every movement, every pause was purposeful, as if she had rehearsed the control of not only the music but the space around her. Others in the room began to gather more openly now. Whispers circulated among them, soft but filled with awe. Some talked about her age, unable to hide the surprise that someone so small could handle such a large instrument with so much skill. Others tried to understand how she could produce such controlled emotion without having lived through so much, not realizing that some talent is instinctive, a gift carried quietly within. A few children lingered near the edges of the circle, their eyes wide. They were amazed to see someone their own age perform at a level they had only dreamed about. Their fascination was not envy. It was inspiration. They felt a small spark of possibility ignite in them. If she could do this, maybe they could too in their own way. The pianist finally cleared his throat, softly, trying not to startle her. "That was impressive," he said, choosing his words carefully. There was no scorn in his voice now, no hint of the earlier scoff. He was genuine, humbled. The words hung in the air, small and almost insignificant compared to what had just been played, yet meaningful in a way that mattered to both of them. The girl paused slightly, then nodded, acknowledging him without breaking her focus. She was used to praise, but she did not need it to continue. Her attention was always on the music, not on the approval of others. It was a rare quality, one that made her playing feel honest and unforced. The pianist studied her as she prepared for the next piece. He noticed the careful placement of her fingers, the tiny movements of her wrists, and the way her feet barely touched the floor. Everything about her was deliberate. Even the smallest actions mattered, and she used them to create balance, expression, and harmony. It was not just technical skill. It was awareness, understanding, and patience beyond her years. The music began again, softer this time, more reflective. The notes were slower, deliberate, each one carefully chosen. It felt like she was telling a story without words, a story anyone could feel if they listened closely. The crowd remained silent, captivated. There was a sense of shared experience, a silent connection among everyone in the room. The music brought them together, even if only for a moment. The pianist leaned in slightly, watching closely. He could feel the subtle changes in her touch, the small differences in pressure that created depth and variation. Every detail mattered, and she controlled it all. He realized that her understanding of music was not just technical but emotional. She could communicate feelings through the piano in a way that few adults ever managed. Around the room, people began to nod to themselves. Some were impressed, some moved, some silent in thought. Nobody talked loudly anymore. Nobody laughed or whispered carelessly. The atmosphere had shifted. What had started as an ordinary afternoon had become something memorable, something meaningful. The girl had taken control of the space, her music shaping it in ways that words could not describe. The pianist's mind wandered. He thought about his own experiences, the performances he had given, the applause he had received. Nothing compared to this. He realized that skill alone could not create the effect he was witnessing. It was something more, something deeper. It was music that carried honesty, humility, and emotion. He had underestimated the power of genuine expression, and now he felt the weight of that lesson. The girl's hands moved with confidence, her small fingers dancing lightly over the keys. The melody shifted subtly, rising and falling like waves. It was complex, yet smooth, powerful yet gentle. She was telling a story about life, struggle, hope, and resilience without a single word. And everyone listening could feel it. The story was universal, understood by all who opened their hearts to it. The pianist couldn't help but admire her focus. She was completely immersed in her performance, aware of the audience but unaffected by it. There was no need for approval or applause. The music was enough. He recognized a rare maturity, one that few adults ever truly achieve. He had always thought skill and age were linked, that experience created depth. Now he knew that understanding and expression could come at any age. A few people in the crowd shifted closer, trying to see the way she controlled the piano. They noticed the details they had missed before, the subtle wrist movements, the careful positioning of her fingers, the natural flow of her energy from body to instrument. They whispered softly, impressed and quietly inspired. Some felt a sense of regret that they had doubted a child's ability to achieve such beauty. The girl paused for a moment, then continued. Each note was measured and intentional. There were no mistakes, no hesitations. The music flowed effortlessly, as if it were coming from somewhere beyond her small body. The pianist felt a chill run down his spine, realizing that this was more than talent. It was a gift, one that demanded respect, patience, and attention. He glanced around the room. Everyone had stopped moving. They were caught in a moment that they knew would not last. Phones were still out, but now they were used to capture a memory, not to distract. Children stared in wonder. Adults whispered quietly, and everyone felt the rare and beautiful connection that can only happen when art touches the soul. The girl's eyes remained focused, her expression calm. She was aware of the pianist now, but she didn't play for him. She played for herself, for the music, and for the story she needed to tell. And the room responded. It was a mutual understanding, a silent agreement that for this moment, music was the only language that mattered. As the piece came to an end, she let her hands rest lightly on the keys. The final note lingered, a gentle echo that filled the space with quiet reflection. The room remained silent for a few beats longer, as if everyone was afraid to break the spell. Then, slowly, a few people began to breathe again. Some whispered, and the pianist finally spoke. He could not hide his admiration. "I've never heard anything like that," he said softly. His earlier pride was gone, replaced by respect and humility. He realized that he had judged too soon, that assumptions based on age and appearance could be dangerously misleading. He had been shown a lesson in patience, observation, and the power of talent expressed honestly. The girl nodded once, acknowledging his words without changing her focus. She knew she had shared something special, but she did not need praise to validate her performance. The effect on the audience was enough. She had told her story, and those who listened understood it. Around them, the atmosphere slowly returned to normal, yet something had changed. People walked away with a sense of awe, carrying the memory of the music with them. The pianist sat back, lost in thought, understanding that he had witnessed something rare. He had been humbled by a child, reminded that age does not define ability, and that true art speaks beyond expectations. The girl stood slowly, her small frame moving gracefully. She collected herself and prepared to leave, but her presence had left a mark. Everyone who had listened felt it. The pianist watched her, his mind filled with new understanding. He knew that this moment, this music, would stay with him for a long time, shaping the way he thought about talent, patience, and the quiet strength of those often underestimated. The pianist sat in his chair, still absorbing what he had just witnessed. He couldn't stop thinking about the small child who had just played the piano like no one had ever imagined. His earlier laughter and scoff felt heavier now, like a weight pressing on him. He had judged her before she had even touched the keys. He had assumed that age meant lack of skill, and now he knew he had been wrong. Slowly, he stood up and approached her. The room was quieter now, with only a few people lingering to watch. They seemed to understand that something significant had just happened, and they didn't want to interfere. The pianist walked carefully, not wanting to break the moment, but wanting to speak to the girl who had already left a lasting impression on him. She was still standing by the piano, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She looked at him briefly, her eyes steady and calm. There was no fear or hesitation. She had played with honesty, and she expected nothing in return. Her small presence was quiet but full of strength. He cleared his throat and spoke softly. "I want to apologize," he said, choosing his words carefully. "I shouldn't have laughed. I shouldn't have assumed. Your playing, it was remarkable." The girl nodded once, acknowledging his words. She didn't smile or speak, but there was a subtle understanding in her gaze. She had heard doubt before, had faced judgment from adults who underestimated her. It was nothing new, but she also knew that this apology was genuine. There was respect now, something she valued far more than praise. The pianist looked down at the keys, then back at her. "I've played for years, in many places, for many people," he said quietly. "I've never heard anything like what you just did. You have a gift, a real gift." The girl's hands moved slightly, resting on the edge of the piano. She had learned to respond to adults with a quiet dignity. She didn't need to speak to prove her worth. Her music had already said more than words could. The pianist understood that, and it humbled him further. He took a step closer, lowering his voice so that only she could hear. "May I ask, how did you learn to play like that?" She paused, considering. Then simply she said, "I practice. I listen. I play what I feel." The pianist nodded slowly. That answer, simple as it was, carried more meaning than anything he had expected. He realized that talent was not just about formal lessons or recognition. It was about dedication, observation, and emotion. This child had found a way to channel her experiences, her feelings, and her understanding into the piano, and it had touched everyone in the room. Around them, the crowd had grown silent, giving them space. People were aware that they were witnessing more than just music. They were seeing a lesson in humility, in respect, and in recognizing talent where it often went unnoticed. The atmosphere was heavy with admiration and quiet reflection. The pianist continued, his voice gentle. "I want you to know that I was wrong. I judged you too quickly, and I'm grateful that you played for everyone today, even after hearing my words." The girl's eyes softened, a small flicker of understanding passing through them. She had faced judgment many times, but not every adult admitted their mistake. This acknowledgement was rare and meaningful. He took a moment to let his words sink in, then asked, "Do you perform often?" "No," she replied simply. "I play when I need to. Music helps me feel." He realized in that moment that her playing was more than performance. It was expression, a way to communicate without speaking. Every note carried a part of her story, her struggles, and her joys. It was authentic, and that authenticity resonated with everyone who heard it. The pianist felt a deep respect growing inside him. He had spent his life performing for audiences, seeking recognition and applause. But this child had reminded him that music was about connection, about feeling, about truth. His previous pride seemed trivial compared to the lesson he was learning now. Around them, the crowd began to disperse slowly, leaving only a few people who lingered to watch quietly. They understood that this moment was special and that it was not meant to be crowded or rushed. The room felt lighter now, filled with the echoes of music and the quiet hum of understanding. The pianist looked back at the girl one more time. "You have something very rare," he said softly. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Your gift is yours, and it will take you far if you keep it." She nodded again, a small, graceful motion. She didn't need to respond further. The message was clear, and it had been received. She had already proven herself through her music, and she would continue to do so in her own way. He stepped back, giving her space, and felt a sense of humility he had rarely experienced. For the first time, he understood that age, experience, and recognition were not the ultimate measures of talent. Genuine expression, dedication, and understanding mattered more than anything else. The pianist turned to leave, glancing over his shoulder one last time. The girl was already moving toward the edge of the room, quiet and unassuming, but the impact of her performance lingered. Everyone who had heard her playing carried a piece of that moment with them. Even the pianist, who had once doubted her, felt changed by the experience. As he walked away, he reflected on what he had witnessed. The child had not only played beautifully but had also taught him a lesson he would never forget. He had been humbled, reminded of the power of patience, respect, and listening before judging. The room, though slowly returning to its usual noise and movement, still held the echoes of her music and the quiet wisdom she had shared without saying a word. He knew that this was a moment he would carry with him for the rest of his life. It was a reminder that talent can be found in the most unexpected places, and that true skill is often accompanied by humility and authenticity. And above all, it was proof that music is not just a series of notes, but a language of the heart that can touch anyone willing to listen. The girl walked away from the piano slowly, her small steps carrying her quietly toward the exit. Even though she was leaving, the effect of her playing lingered in the room like a gentle hum, soft but impossible to ignore. The people who had stopped to listen looked after her, each carrying a memory of the music she had created and the feeling it had left behind. There was a shared understanding that they had witnessed something rare and beautiful. The pianist remained seated for a moment, reflecting on everything that had happened. He thought about the pride he had felt before laughing, and how quickly it had been replaced by humility and awe. The child had shown him that talent could not be measured by age or appearance, and that real artistry came from honesty, dedication, and emotion. He felt grateful for the lesson she had given him, a lesson he knew he would carry for the rest of his life. He stood slowly, moving toward the piano once more. He didn't sit down this time. Instead, he reached out and pressed a key softly, listening to the sound echo in the room. It felt different now, almost empty without the girl's presence, yet full of possibility. He thought about how music could connect people, even strangers, in a way that nothing else could. Her performance had reminded him of that power, and it was something he wanted to hold on to. Outside the room, the girl continued walking. Her eyes were calm, but there was a quiet determination in her steps. She didn't rush, didn't look back, yet she knew the moment had changed something. She had shared her music honestly, and in doing so, she had shown everyone around her that true skill and expression were not bound by age or experience. Her story, told through her fingers on the piano, had spoken louder than any words could. The pianist watched her from the doorway, feeling a sense of admiration and respect. He realized that this child had not only played beautifully but had also touched hearts and minds. People would remember her performance, not just for the music, but for the lesson it carried. That assumptions and judgments often blind us to true talent, and that humility and openness are essential to truly understanding the world around us. He thought about the children in the audience who had watched with wide eyes. Some of them had been inspired, imagining themselves at the piano, dreaming of creating something beautiful. He knew that her example could influence them for years to come, planting seeds of possibility and hope. The music had reached beyond him, beyond the room, and it would continue to grow in ways he could not measure. The girl continued walking, carrying her small bag and her quiet confidence. She knew that not everyone would understand her, that some would continue to doubt or underestimate her. But that didn't matter. She had shared what she could, and it had been enough. She had expressed herself honestly, and that was the most important thing. Her music was her voice, her way of telling her story without words, and it had been heard by those who were ready to listen. Back in the room, the pianist finally sat down at the piano. He placed his fingers on the keys and began to play softly, inspired by what he had witnessed. He thought about the lessons he had learned, about the humility and respect the girl had shown through her music. Each note he played carried a small piece of that understanding, a reminder of what it meant to truly listen and appreciate talent wherever it might be found. People in the room had begun to return to their routines, but there was a subtle change in the atmosphere. Conversations were quieter, movements slower, as if everyone was carrying a small piece of the magic that had happened. The pianist could feel it in the air, the memory of the girls playing lingering like a gentle echo. It was a reminder that moments of beauty and honesty leave a lasting mark, even when the source has moved on. The girl reached the street and paused for a moment. She looked back toward the building, not out of pride, but out of acknowledgement. She had shared her music, and it had been received. That was enough. She took a deep breath and continued walking, knowing that her journey with music would continue, that her playing was not just for others, but for herself as well. It was her way of expressing, learning, and growing, and it would carry her far in ways she could not yet imagine. The pianist continued to play softly in the room, each note a tribute to what he had learned from her. He thought about how easy it was to judge others without understanding their experience or their dedication. Her playing had reminded him that true talent is quiet, patient, and authentic. It does not seek attention but commands it naturally through its sincerity and depth. He felt fortunate to have witnessed such a rare moment, and he knew he would never forget it. Outside, the girl disappeared into the crowd, small but determined. She had shown that even a single person, no matter how young, could create a powerful impact through skill, emotion, and honesty. She had turned doubt into respect, laughter into admiration, and assumptions into understanding. And she had done it all without needing recognition, without needing applause, only through the language of her music. The pianist finally closed the piano lid and stood, taking one last look around the room. The echoes of her music still hung in the air, a gentle reminder that moments of true beauty do not fade easily. He felt a quiet gratitude for having been a witness to her gift and for the lessons she had shared through her playing. The experience had changed him, reminding him of the importance of humility, attention, and appreciation. As he walked away, he carried with him the memory of a small child who had played with the depth and understanding of someone much older. He knew that the lessons he had learned would influence not only his music but the way he approached life, relationships, and judgment. She had reminded him that greatness is not always loud, and that true talent often comes quietly, revealing itself in moments of honesty and sincerity. And somewhere in the city, the girl continued on her path, her small figure moving forward with confidence and quiet strength. She had shared her gift, touched hearts, and taught a lesson without even realizing it. Her music had created a ripple, one that would reach far beyond that room, leaving an impact on those who heard it and those who would remember it for years to come. The world had changed, even if only slightly, because she had played, and that was enough.